My name is Gwen. I'm the Assistant Registrar, Recruitment and International at the John H. Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape, and Design. And I'm very pleased that you have joined us today to learn a little bit more about one of the programs that we offer. I'm going to briefly introduce the panelists that we have here today, and then we will move into a formal presentation. After the presentation, we will be able to take your questions. And so if you have any questions at all during the presentation, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can input your questions there, and the panelists will be able to answer those questions. So today we are joined by Professor Claire Zimmerman, who is also the program director, Professor Jason Nguyen, and PhD program administrator, Laura Lipchinsky. And so I welcome you all, and I will pass it over you to Claire to start the presentation.
Thank you so much, Gwen. My name is Claire Zimmerman, as Gwen said, and I'm the current director of the ALD PhD program at the Daniels faculty. I'm a historian. I specialize in 20th century architecture, but mostly in Europe and America, although some increasingly globally in recent years. And my focus has been modes of representation and modes of mass production in architecture. I've just finished a big project on Albert Kahn, the industrial architect based in Detroit. Um, I'm speaking to you today as the director of the program more than as an individual scholar, but I'm also a member of faculty in the program. I'll hand it over to Jason, and he can give you a little bit of a sense of his background.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Nguyen. Like Claire, I'm also a historian. My area of research, my research focus is early modern architecture. So that kind of roughly means 16th to 18th century architecture. I focus kind of on the second half of that. So 17th, 18th century architecture, interested in broader concerns like technical practice and technical practice in architecture, architectural theory, more increasingly issues of like trade and globalization. I should say I do tend to work on an earlier period than some of my colleagues here, but I was a practicing architect for a period. So a lot of my interests actually do intersect with I would say like things that, I don't know, architects tend to be interested in. I'll hand it back over to Claire, or if Laura is
Laura, will you just say a little bit about your job and your
Hi, I'm Laura. I am the a program administrator, so I do more of the administrative type things that you may encounter if you come here, like your funding packages, course enrollment, etc. If you have any issues with payments, funding, enrollment, you can come to me and I can either help you or direct you to what you need to do.
Great. So today we're just going to give you a brief overview with a set of slides and talk a little bit about the people who are here, the faculty and the students who are in the program, as well as the staff that supports us, just to give you a sense of what might be possible here, as well as what might not fit so well here. So I'll start that off, and I'm going to hand off to Jason when we get to the historical topics and give you a brief overview myself of our computational and building science topics. We start the presentation with an overview of our building because it is an incredible asset to have this beautifully adaptively redesigned and built institution in the middle of a traffic island on the western edge of the University of Toronto campus. We have a really distinctive home within the university, and this is where you would be spending a fair amount of time, not all your time, but this is a center for our faculty and students. We are, in the most general definition, I would say we are a multimodal, multidisciplinary advanced research program in areas that are or are adjacent to the built environment in all of its iterations. So we do a wide range of disciplinary investigations into the built environment surrounding a faculty of architecture. Here are some of the subject areas that we tackle in the PhD program that are, again, this kind of constellation of practices around a design school: history and theory, landscape studies, visual studies and art practices, urbanism and urban history, infrastructure and globalization, environmental science, computation and robotic fabrication, and building science. The Daniels faculty also offers a PhD in forestry, and this is a tremendous asset that we're just beginning to try to realize a little bit. Our relationship with our forestry colleagues is dynamic and growing, and we hope to be able to join forces with them more in the years ahead. There's a list of current students on our website. Here they are. You can certainly reach out to them with questions. Don't bombard them with too many. But once you have a better understanding of the program and whether it seems like a real prospect for you, sometimes these students will have interesting reflections and pieces of advice about our program. And they are spread throughout our different fields, including students in visual studies, students in building science, students in history theory, and students in computation. We also have one student in landscape history. Um, so that's the roster of those who are here now. Today, I'm just going to talk about a few of our areas of research as represented in some of our faculty projects. You would be coming here to do your own work, but you would be doing it in close relationship with a faculty member. I would stress that this differs depending on which area you are in, which area your research lies in. In history and theory of architecture, we work very much side by side in parallel without having projects that are exactly the same as those of our students. Whereas in the building sciences and in environmental science, there's a considerably more collaboration in a lab context between professors and students. And that is also true in computation and robotic fabrication. So it's important to realize the differences between the disciplines that we serve in this program. Here's the list of our core faculty. All of these names have a page on the website that enables you to investigate a little bit of what they do. And the real question is that from this core group, do you have a significant area of shared interest or overlap with any of these professors? Because that's really the way in which we select our cohorts is by the relationship between faculty research and student proposed research. If you don't find somebody who you would benefit from working with on this faculty roster, then chances are it's going to be harder for us to admit you because that's what we look for is a match between our faculty and applicants, and of course, excellence in the applicants. So having one of those, excellence, is not necessarily enough to gain admission to the program if we don't have the excellence to serve your project. So be very mindful of that as you look through our faculty listings. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the work of Brady Peters and Maria Jablonina, chiefly Maria in terms of these particular slides. It's not my area of research, so for more information, you'll need to talk to the faculty in the area, but we should try to give you some overview of the kinds of projects that they work on. Maria has worked with her graduate students to publish papers about the design and construction of robots, and her special focus of interest are very small robots. So robots that are portable, that you can take to building sites, and that can tackle all kinds of operations that would be impossible to tackle in a large fabrication lab. So she has provided some images like these of robots that actually move around existing buildings to try to troubleshoot things that are wrong with them or conduct small operations or diagnoses on them. This has been an area of focus for her for a while, and she's working with students on some very interesting robotics projects relating to digital fabrication and actually to digital defabrication or unbuilding projects. There are also, of course, a whole array of digital fabrication projects that both she and Brady Peters have worked on that are possible to investigate given the facilities of our fabrication lab. In terms of environmental science, we have Professor Alston Jakubiak. He was hoping to be with us today, but he wasn't able to make it. He is conducting what I would call quantitative investigations into qualitative aspects of architecture. And that's the challenge that his projects face and those of his students. How do you quantify qualities that are regarded as important to architectural design and construction? And there are various ways in which Alston and his students do this. One of them is through measuring daylight. Others are measuring other climatic conditions of buildings, having to do with human comfort and human health, both mental health and physical health, as those are affected by building environments. So here are some of the student projects that Alston's students are working on with him. Students having projects having to do with measuring light, so quantifying light, projects related to human vision, projects related to luminance. They use quite a lot of environmental simulation to gain results, but they also use survey techniques and actual physical measuring devices to understand how environmental forces are acting on buildings. In harder building science, we have Shoaib Amiri, who's working on deep energy retrofits with Daniel Chung. Fiona and Nazanin are both working with Alston on these environmental projects. And here are some of the kinds of projects that they have tackled. I'm going to hand over to Jason to talk a little bit about history and theory, and then we'll come back and take your questions.
Thank you, Claire. So as Claire said, history and theory is one of the other areas that we're going to discuss today, and one that has a great number of faculty members. Claire has given the faculty members here who kind of specialize in history and theory of architecture. That is herself, Peter Seeley, myself, John Harwood, and Alexander Bierig. We cover a fairly wide, in terms of history and theory of architecture, a fairly wide historical span that's kind of broadly the early modern and modern period. So I suppose beginning in what one might call the Renaissance. And we cover a fairly good geographic spread, although I suppose it does tend to in Europe and North America. We have a number of issues that are shared among the faculty members, issues of political economy, issues of technology, media studies, among other things. I mean, perhaps if Claire, if you want to discuss your own research a little bit, you're more than welcome. It's here on the slide.
Yeah. So I've been working on this is a book project having to do with the political valences of architecture, but mostly I've also been working on energy regimes and political economy in architecture through mass production, through factory manufacture, and the buildings that make it possible. I can advance from this slide since we're not meant to focus too much on my work to Jason.
Yeah, so as I had said before, my area of research is the early modern period, or roughly the 16th to 18th century. It is European history. I suppose that much of my research to date has been on France or the Francophone world, the wider Francophone world. I'm recently completing a book project on the development of the profession of architecture in 17th, 18th century France, specifically around notions of expertise. So, as I said before, kind of broadly relates to issues of theory and practice, the bureaucracy of architectural practice, relationships between broadly about the kind of formalization of the discipline or the field as we think of it today. More recent research, which this slide is referenced to as the architecture of trade. I'm starting a new project that's on kind of the trade infrastructure that's being developed in littoral or like coastal contexts in many kind of colonial contexts that were built to support the burgeoning luxury trades in Europe. So I show here a picture. It feels a bit close to home. It is it's a fort and storage site that is here in Quebec. Well, I suppose it's not here. We are in Ontario, but is along the St. Lawrence River. This is an image from the 17th century. So yeah, I mean, as Claire had said, or maybe had said, there are a number of shared interests among our faculty, infrastructure being one of them, political economy, technologies, media. And so perhaps you can start to see some relationships here, my work and Claire's, despite the fact that I kind of cover different historical periods. We have a lot of shared interests, and you would find that among many of the history and theory faculty. Can maybe go to the next one.
Yeah, sorry.
This is Peter Seeley. Peter Seeley, who's not with us today, but whose work broadly speaking deals with modern architecture, 19th and 20th century architecture and media studies. By that, I mean questions of photography, film, other modes of representation, has worked more seriously on the 19th century photography in the French context, has done a lot of work more recently in terms of the representation in architecture, how architecture is used in like filmic in film and media. Specifically with the kind of city of Berlin and how the city of Berlin is being mobilized through the media of film to kind of as a storytelling device.
Okay.
This is my colleague, Alexander Bierig, who works broadly 18th century to the present on architecture and coal or architecture and energy. His interests, I suppose you could call Alec, he is our environmental historian of architecture, is working on a project that looks at the kind of coal economy that's developed in the 18th and 19th century in Britain. You can think of its relationship to coal to, like, say, the steam engine and the broader kind of urban and architectural revolutions or changes that take place during that period. And I think his interests widely speak to, I suppose, what we would call today the Anthropocene, or the kind of wider kind of environmental changes that have happened during the modern era.
There are more faculty on the website, so please look them up. But we wanted to give you just a little bit of a sense of where we are. This is a photograph of our building while the construction was still going on. The whole building was gutted. An addition was put on the back, which you can see from some of the other images in our array. And this space was created for the use of our PhD students. This is the PhD studio. It's been slightly reconfigured since this image was taken. Basically, each student in our program has a kind of private workstation in this space with a desk and a little bit of enclosure and shelves. And I think one of the great things about our program is this shared space where the students all work together or have the ability to work together and talk to each other. It's a beautiful space, as you can see, lit on three sides. I hear some complaints that it's freezing cold in the winter and very warm in the summer, but we are dealing with those problems. And this is typical of architecture schools that are so beautifully designed and often climatically challenging. But this is really a lovely asset of the program is the space that students have to work together in the building. There's the building with our addition showing on the back, which is mostly studio space, but also some excellent state-of-the-art classroom spaces, and where we basically all spend quite a bit of time. We are fortunate in that our library is still on site. As you may know, many architecture schools have moved their libraries off-site and even out of reach. But our library remains in the building, and you can go and browse the shelves. It's an OpenStack library, and that's another, I think, a terrific asset of the program, particularly for student research. So I think that's about what we had for you today. There's the Fab Lab down below with the robot kind of occupying double height space, and then the studio floors above in this lovely building designed by Nader Tirani and finished just a couple of years ago. So it's really still quite a new building. And I think now we're ready to take any questions that anybody may have.
I would maybe add just one small thing, which is in addition to our library, there's countless other libraries at the University of Toronto, and we have one of the largest libraries in North America, the largest academic library in North America, certainly the largest in Canada. And it's a great asset regardless of your area of research, whether it's in earth sciences or history and theory or computation. It offers some of the best resources that are really possible.
Jason, do you want to say a little bit more about our relationship with other units in general? The libraries are, of course, a terrific asset, but would you have anything else to add there?
Sure, of course. I mean, as Claire had mentioned, we sit here on this traffic island, which perhaps like lends us to be a little inward looking at times, but we're part of a much larger institution, the University of Toronto, obviously the largest institution of higher education in Canada, but really one of the great leaders of research across many different fields, whether that's more on the humanities, social science, hard science, and so on. So we have really close relationships with other departments. Claire and I being historians, we have rather close relationships with art history, humanities departments more generally, but we have close relationships with geography, for instance, which are maybe more on the kind of territorial questions of territories, environmental questions. There is the policy school, which is called the Monk School for those who might be interested in urbanism, especially urbanism, perhaps in parts of the world that aren't represented specifically within our four walls. So there are countless other institutions. I would say that the University of Toronto, in addition to having many other departments whose connections are maybe interpersonal, there are many research centers on the university. So for instance, I'm quite involved with the Early Modern Center. There is an institution called the Jackman Humanities Institute for those who are maybe interested more in the humanities and social sciences, as well as many kind of labs within engineering and the hard sciences that serve as a kind of opportunity for people from different disciplines or different units, I guess, to come together. It's really one of, I suppose, one of the greatest assets that we can offer is having this kind of research center and kind of laboratory, if you will, in the center of Toronto. And we have many different connections also beyond the campus, a number of kind of research institutions that with whom we partner abroad. So there is one, for instance, within the environmental humanities and sciences that's between us, Oxford, and University of Pennsylvania. I know, and countless others. So being within our institution offers many different opportunities to widen or to engage a wide network.
I would just add to that by saying that we are increasingly responsive to the specific projects of our students. So we have managed now to find ways for our building science students to take some of their requirements in the engineering school so that they are specializing right away when they come into the program. It's a little early to announce a couple of other initiatives, but I can say that in the next few years, we're hoping to create a collaborative program with the art history department for those students interested in history and theory. Art history has a raft of great architectural historians as well, some of whom are listed on our roster. And we would like to work more closely with them. We have increasingly close relations with anthropology, with history and philosophy of science and technology, and with the Robotics Institute. So lots of collaboration. As those of you who are Canadian will already know, Canada has a serious commitment to truth and reconciliation. And we have Indigenous advisors here at the Daniels faculty. We don't yet have a kind of PhD specialization in Indigenous architecture because we don't have faculty in that area, but we are working in that direction and hoping to begin to collaborate with colleagues in Oceania and in Western Canada to build up a specialization in Indigenous architecture and environments that will not come online for a year or two, but we're really interested in talking to people who are interested in that subject as well. I think that is a pretty good overview of our offerings, and we could now just take your questions.
Okay, great. So a number of questions have come in already. So the first question is related to references for the application. This applicant has been out of school for quite some time, and so all of their supervisors have retired. Who would you recommend in terms of a strong reference? Is it okay to ask former lab colleagues or students that they studied with in previous labs for recommendations?
I think that would be the logical thing to do. I think we can take letters from retired faculty as long as they're still providing them. But certainly, colleagues who've gone on to specialize in the field would be the best alternative.
Okay, thank you. So this question is in regards to topics. They'd like to know if they would have the chance to further refine their topics with supervisors that they are assigned, should they be admitted into the program. So is that a possibility?
I think it depends very much what area we're talking about. Certainly, if it's in a building science area, um, or a computation area, there would be a pretty close relationship between the advisor's research, the supervisor's research, and the student's research. In history theory, you can again think of your supervisor as an advanced colleague as much as a collaborator. We don't tend to co-author papers with our students in the history theory area. Not that we can't do that in future, but so far the evidence does not support the claim that we do that, if you know what I mean.
I would also say that the program has 2 years of coursework built into it, and it's expected, that the students, as they go through the coursework, that their interests will evolve and develop further. Probably if you start out with one like in building science, you might not. The likelihood you're switching into history and theory like halfway through is probably not likely, but I think it's expected that the research topics will like develop and mature and evolve in a meaningful way. And certainly that would be something that the student would discuss with their advisor.
Okay. So this question is, what is the average time to completion for your PhD students?
We fund our students for 4 years. In some areas, 4 years is sufficient to finish a PhD, and that specifically would be building science and environmental science. In other areas, it's much harder to finish in 4 years, and so we help our students apply for grants that would give them a year or two more. I would say that for a history theory PhD, 6 years would be pretty quick. Um, for computation, I think it's not unreasonable to expect students to finish in 5. Um, but we do not have funding for those additional years, and so students have to work hard to get an external scholarship or a grant that will cover their basic costs for the additional years.
Okay, so we've answered all the questions that have been asked live, but we did have some that were submitted in advance. So I will pose those questions to you as well. So this question is what to do if they've reached out to potential supervisors and have not heard back.
Don't do anything. The fact that they didn't write back to you does not mean that they did not read your email. Basically, I think some faculty feel that it is not fair to engage in back and forth with students before the application portal closes. That doesn't mean they haven't noted your interest and read your CV and basically made themselves aware of your interest. It's a very, very busy semester, and some faculty simply do not answer these kinds of queries. Um, and I don't think anybody should infer anything from it. Of course, it's much nicer to get a response from a faculty member and to be able to have some back and forth with them. But I recently had to say to a potential applicant that I couldn't have any more communication because it would not be fair to the other applicants that I had already um, responded to the initial inquiry, and after that point, I didn't feel that it was appropriate for me to engage in further back and forth with them.
I would say that the applicant should ensure that when they're thinking about potential advisors or supervisors, certainly knowing the kind of like protocols of your field. For instance, history and theory folks usually do not have a lab, so to speak, so the kind of protocols of like history and theory versus building science versus computation, they're slightly different. We would anticipate that a PhD student or an applicant have enough background that it's not like their first time experiencing that field. Obviously, it's a advanced research degree, but they would want the student or the applicant would want an advisor who can, in a very sincere way, like have shared research interests. And I think that would be like um, obvious based on like research topics. So I think like the student should, or the applicant rather, should just like when they write their application, like be sure to clarify how the research that they're hoping to undertake relates to the potential advisor's research.
Yeah, I would say we get a lot of emails from students who clearly haven't looked at what we do. And because I'm the director, I try to answer every single one with the basic information for our program. But some of my colleagues, if they get an email, if they're a history theory professor and they get an email saying, I want to work with you, I'm interested in environmental simulation, they're not going to answer that email. You need to be sure that you know what the faculty member does, and that you are reading their work, that there's actually a reason that you might want to come and work with them. It's a very, very tailored degree. It's very it's crucial for everybody that the match be a good match, so that both the student and the faculty member can work effectively to the education of the student. So if you didn't get an answer, it's not a great sign. You might go back and look at your email and see whether you actually addressed the work of that faculty member as a potential supervisor, or if you were perhaps not as familiar with their profile as you should be. We're not here to take on students who we can't properly advise. It would be irresponsible of us to do that. So there's a very strong emphasis on matching research areas and interests. When I get someone writing to me to ask about a project on photography, I don't know what to say. I published a book on photography in 2014. That's 11 years ago. I've published a number of books since then on very different topics. And I have a colleague who works directly on photography, Peter Seeley. So when I get that kind of email, I don't really know what to say, except that they're not really looking at what I do.
Thank you for that answer, Claire. So this question is in regards to the specific subject area. And so they would like to do research on colonial buildings in West Africa and would like to know if the major subject area would fall under history and theory of architecture and built environment.
Absolutely. And we have a lot of us are really interested in colonial architecture and the effects of colonialism on the built environment. We don't at the moment have an Africanist, but we have Jason, who's specialized in French colonialism, Alec, who specializes in British colonialism. I specialize in more or less US and German colonialism. So we definitely feel that we could support a project like that.
Okay. So this question is there a potential to do studies part-time and or online?
There is not at present, and we are aware of the difficulty that this presents to students. So it is not off the table for us to be thinking about this. But as of right now, um, we don't have a program tailored for that. Now, the University of Toronto does actually have a provision for a part-time PhD, and but it is typically not on Zoom. It is basically part-time for people who are working in Toronto. We haven't had anybody request that from us, but we would certainly take it seriously if we wanted to admit a student who was unable to go full-time.
Okay, thank you. So this question is, what would be the length of time for a PhD program in landscape studies?
Well, we have a landscape historian, so the project has to appeal to the landscape historian. It would then be supported by other members of our landscape faculty. We have research active faculty in the landscape area who do very interesting work. That would, to my mind, be probably a 5 or 6 year PhD, unless the candidate came in with within a very advanced record. I would say this is another sort of uh, a wild card factor that students come in with very different levels of training, and for us to estimate how long it would take them to do a PhD, we would need to know a little bit more about the candidate.
Okay, thank you. So that's all the questions that have come in. So to our guests in the audience, if you have any other questions, please submit those so they can be answered live. Is there anything else, Claire, that you maybe wanted to
Yeah,
share? Okay.
yeah, I did not include a map of our curriculum in the slide array, and I'm now thinking that probably it would be just as well. My assumption is that everyone who's gotten to this stage has looked pretty carefully at our curriculum. But just to reiterate what Jason said, we have 2 years of coursework. We have two qualifying exams, one at the end of year one at the end of year two. After that, you write a proposal and you defend it in an oral presentation. And after that, you begin writing your dissertation. So typically, our students will be writing their dissertation from year three on. So they basically have 2 years to do it. And that's the reason why sometimes 4 years is not sufficient. If you're going into the field to do a lot of archival work, like the history theory students do, then you need some time to do that kind of work. But I just want to emphasize the structure of our curriculum and the required courses versus the elective courses that students do. We have a small cluster of required courses. And we are, as I said before, adjusting those around our subject areas to make sure that they are, that they are appropriate to the students that enter the program.
Thank you, Claire. So there is a question about references for the application. Is it possible to submit more than 3?
I don't think so, but maybe Laura could answer that. I think there's a limit on the portal.
I'm not sure if there's a limit on the portal, but if you have additional references, you can always forward them to the research stream email and I can pass them on to Claire for the application process.
Yeah, I'm not sure we would feel right about reading more than three, just because that's the standard for everyone. One thing to remember with the PhD admissions is that you're one person applying, but we're considering dozens and dozens of applications, and we need to have a kind of common, like an equal. We need to treat you equitably, and not provide certain people with greater opportunities than we provide others with. So that would be my hesitation. That it doesn't seem quite fair to take 4 letters of reference from somebody and only 3 from somebody else.
Okay. So again, we have answered all of the questions that have been submitted. Is there anything else, Claire, that you'd like to add, or Jason or Laura?
Just be in touch and don't take it personally if you don't get immediate responses, but look carefully at our offerings, at our faculty and what they do, and be in touch with any questions.
Okay, great. Well, if there is no more questions and nothing else to add, I would like to thank all of our panelists for joining us today and sharing all of the information with our prospective students. So we thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day.